Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep into The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt.
Ooh, yeah, I've heard good things about that one.
Yeah, it's got like a 4.43 rating on Goodreads, which is pretty impressive. Right?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. What's it all about?
Well, it dives into this whole thing about mental health in young people, specifically like the decline since 2010.
So like Gen Z and all that.
Exactly. And speaking of good stuff, don't forget to check out the episode description for a purchase link and some extra resources if you want to dive deeper after this.
Always appreciate those links.
Of course. Okay, so diving right in, one thing that really struck me about Haidt's approach was how he doesn't just present the problem.
Right.
He really tries to understand the why behind it all. He explores all these potential causes, from parenting styles to these big societal shifts, and of course the big one, technology.
Yeah, you can't really talk about this generation without talking about tech, can you?
It's everywhere. It's almost like we can all sense that something shifted, right? But the anxious generation actually tries to put data and a framework around it.
So it's not just vibes.
No, not just vibes. There are actual numbers to back it up. And speaking of numbers, one statistic that really jumped out at me was the suicide rate among 10 to 14-year-olds.
Okay, yeah, that's a sensitive topic for sure.
It increased by an average of 121% between 2010 and 2020.
Whoa, that's a huge jump.
It's really hard to even process, honestly.
Absolutely. It's heartbreaking.
And it's not just an isolated trend, unfortunately. Haidt's research points to a broader surge in anxiety, depression, self-harm, all that. But what's interesting is that he really focuses on Gen Z.
Right, those born after 1995, right?
Exactly. His argument is that they've experienced this, what he calls a great rewiring of childhood.
Great rewiring of childhood. What's that all about?
It's basically this shift, right, from a play-based upbringing, like running around outside, playing with friends.
Yeah, the good old days.
Right, to one that's totally dominated by phones and screens.
I mean, that's pretty much all they know, right?
It's their world. If we think about these kids growing up on Mars, what are the most significant ways this Mars childhood is impacting them?
Well, let's hear it. Tell me about this Mars childhood.
So Haidt outlines 4 major harms that result from this phone-based existence, this Mars life.
4 major harms. Okay, hit me with them.
Okay, so we've got social deprivation.
Less face-to-face interaction.
Right. And that impacts how they develop social skills. Then there's sleep deprivation.
Oh, yeah, the constant notifications, the blue light, all that jazz.
And then attention fragmentation.
With all that information overload, hard to focus on just one thing.
Exactly. And lastly, addiction.
Social media, gaming, they're designed to be addictive, right?
Totally. So just to give you an idea of how serious this social deprivation thing is, get this. Time spent with friends in person decreased by 50% in 2012 alone.
50%? Whoa, that's a huge chunk of time.
Right. Time that could have been spent, building those real-world social skills that we all need.
It's like we're trading face-to-face connection for, virtual interactions.
Exactly. And Haidt argues that this trade-off has some pretty serious consequences.
Yeah, no kidding. What about this sleep deprivation piece? How does he connect that to all this?
Well, he talks about how those constant notifications, that always-on mentality, it makes it harder for young people to disconnect.
Right, to actually unplug and get some rest.
Exactly. And then you add the attention fragmentation piece.
Right, the constant bombardment of information.
It's like we're asking these young minds to function in a constant state of overdrive.
No wonder they're anxious. And then there's the addiction factor on top of it all.
Right. It's like a perfect storm.
They're socially deprived, sleep deprived, struggling to focus, and getting sucked into these online spaces.
It's a tough combination. So far, this is sounding pretty bleak, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
But before we spiral into despair, I'm really curious to hear about the solutions Haidt proposes. He doesn't just leave us hanging with a list of problems, does he?
Well, that's what I'm here to find out.
Good point. But before we get to those solutions, there's one more layer of complexity that Haidt explores that I think is super interesting. Gender differences.
Oh, interesting. So social media and smartphones affect boys and girls differently?
That's what Haidt's research suggests, yeah.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about these gender differences.
So, for example, girls seem to be more affected by social comparison.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
You think about those perfectly curated images, those seemingly perfect lives that dominate social media, right?
It's all about the highlight reel.
Exactly. And that can have a real impact on self-esteem, body image, especially for girls.
Especially during those already tough adolescent years.
Exactly. It makes you wonder how much anxiety comes from comparing your reality to someone else's carefully crafted online persona.
It's easy to forget that it's not all real.
Totally. And what about cyberbullying? Does Haidt touch on that too?
Absolutely. And again, it seems to affect girls more severely.
I'd imagine so, yeah.
It's partly because girls tend to experience more relational aggression, where harm is inflicted through relationships and social status.
It's like the online world amplifies that kind of aggression, right?
Exactly. It can be super damaging, especially for girls who often, value relationships and social harmony.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And for boys, are they experiencing different harms?
Well, they're definitely exposed to these harms too. But Haidt's research suggests they tend to struggle more with video game and pornography addiction.
Okay, so like withdrawal into those digital worlds.
Exactly. And that leads to, its own set of challenges.
Like social isolation.
Exactly. Difficulty forming real world connections, that kind of thing.
So we're seeing these two distinct patterns emerging, with girls grappling more with social pressures and comparison,
Right.
and boys being more prone to retreating into these digital worlds.
It's fascinating, right? How these different harms manifest.
And it's crucial to understand these nuances because it helps us figure out how to address these issues.
Right. Different solutions for different problems.
Exactly. But before we get to those, there's one last piece of Haidt's argument we need to explore.
Okay, lay it on me.
Parenting styles. How those factor into all of this.
Ooh, interesting.
I know he talks about safetyism in the book.
Yeah, but I'm still not entirely clear on what that actually means.
Okay, so safetyism refers to this, like overprotective parenting style that's become so common.
Okay, so like helicopter parenting?
It's that idea that parents are trying to shield their kids from every possible risk.
Right, to create like a risk-free bubble.
Exactly. But in doing so, they actually end up hindering their development.
It's like that old saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Haidt's totally on board with that. He believes that kids need some level of risk, even discomfort, to grow.
Okay, so let them skin their knees, fall out of trees, that kind of thing.
It's about stepping back and recognizing that some level of risk is actually healthy.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Like, it's necessary for development.
But how does this safetyism thing tie back to technology?
Well, Haidt argues that by eliminating all risk, we're actually making our kids more vulnerable in the long run. They don't develop the skills to deal with life's inevitable challenges.
So when they encounter those challenges, they're less equipped to handle them.
Exactly. And that's where the allure of the online world comes in.
Oh, I see. It becomes like a safe haven.
Right. Because it feels controlled and predictable.
And when you haven't had those real-world experiences, those opportunities to grapple with discomfort, you're more likely to seek that solace and validation online.
It's like this vicious cycle.
Yep.
Overprotective parenting leads to lack of real-world experience, which leads to more susceptibility to the harms of technology.
And more anxiety and more dependence on those digital worlds.
It's a tough cycle to break.
Definitely. And it really highlights why Haidt is pushing for a multi-pronged approach.
Right. It's not just about restricting technology.
It's about rethinking our parenting practices, creating a more balanced environment for kids to actually thrive.
This is all so incredibly thought-provoking, and I'm already feeling like I have a much deeper understanding of what this generation is dealing with.
I'm right there with you. It's heavy stuff, but also really eye-opening.
Now I'm even more eager to dive into Haidt's solutions. Haidt proposes these foundational reforms that could help address these issues. Remember those?
Oh, yeah, the big sweeping changes he suggests. Hit me with them.
Okay, so his first one is a doozy. No smartphones before high school.
Okay, that's a big one.
Right. No smartphones until kids are at least 14.
I can imagine that would be met with a lot of resistance from parents, and probably kids too.
Oh, absolutely. But his argument is that those early years are just so crucial for development.
Right, for building those foundational social, emotional, and cognitive skills.
Exactly. And smartphones, as we've been discussing, can be incredibly addictive and distracting.
So it's about giving kids the time and space to develop those essential skills before introducing a device that can really hijack their attention.
It's about being intentional and thoughtful about when and how we introduce technology into their lives.
And not just handing them a smartphone the minute they turn 10 because all their friends have one.
Right. Okay. But it's not just about smartphones. Haidt also proposes no social media before age 16.
Oh, wow. So even later.
He's especially concerned about the impact of social media on adolescents. They're already going through so much.
Yeah, figuring out who they are, where they fit in. It's a tough time.
And then you throw social media into the mix with all the social comparison, the pressure to present a perfect image.
Yeah, it's a lot to handle, even for adults.
Right. So Haidt argues that delaying access to social media gives them a better chance to develop a stronger sense of self before they're bombarded with all of that.
Okay, I'm seeing a theme here. Delayed access to technology seems to be a key part of Haidt's strategy.
You're catching on. Okay, what do you think his other two foundational reforms are?
Well, we've tackled home life and social life. I'm going to guess one of them has to do with school.
You got it. Phone-free schools.
Get those distractions out of the classroom.
Exactly. Haidt believes that creating these tech-free zones in schools allows for deeper learning, better social interactions, and a stronger sense of community.
Plus, I bet teachers would be thrilled. No more battling with students to put their phones away.
Oh, absolutely. It frees up so much time and energy for actual teaching and learning. Okay, so that's 3 down, 1 to go. Any guesses on the last one?
Let me think. We've covered smartphones, social media, schools. Has to be something that ties back to this idea of kids needing more real-world experiences.
Ding, ding, ding. You win. His fourth foundational reform is more unsupervised play and childhood independence.
Oh, yeah, back to that safetyism thing we were talking about, letting kids explore, take risks, and learn from their own experiences.
Exactly. It's about giving them the freedom to make mistakes, to figure things out on their own.
And to develop that sense of self-reliance that's so important for navigating the world.
Okay, so let's recap. Haidt's 4 foundational reforms are: no smartphones before high school, no social media before 16, phone-free schools, and more unsupervised play.
4 pretty bold ideas, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's safe to say that implementing them would require a pretty massive shift in our societal norms and values.
Yeah, it would take a collective effort, for sure. Parents, educators, policymakers, tech companies, everyone would need to be on board.
It's a huge undertaking, but Haidt argues that it's necessary if we want to address this anxiety epidemic among young people.
It's about taking a step back and really asking ourselves, what kind of childhood do we want to create for future generations?
And what role do we want technology to play in that childhood?
Big questions. But before we get too deep into those, I think it's time to hear from our listeners.
Right, let's get their perspectives on all of this.
So tell us, what are your thoughts on Haidt's foundational reforms?
Do they seem realistic? What challenges do you foresee in implementing them?
And what are you already doing in your own families and communities to foster a healthier, more balanced relationship with technology?
Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.
It's so great to hear from our listeners, you know?
Yeah, it's awesome to get your perspectives. It seems like a lot of people are really grappling with this whole tech and kids thing.
Definitely a hot topic. So where were we? Oh yeah, Haidt's recommendations. Remember, he doesn't just outline the problems. He actually offers solutions too.
Right. He gives us a roadmap, a way forward. So let's start with parents, because I think that's where a lot of our listeners are coming from.
Totally. So Haidt breaks it down by age group, which is super helpful. Like for the littlest ones, those 0 to 5-year-olds.
Yeah. What's his advice for them?
He's all about prioritizing time, play, and real-world interactions. You know, that good old-fashioned stuff. And limiting screen time, of course.
Makes sense. It's like building a foundation, right?
Exactly. Those early years are so important for development. It's about showing them that there's a whole world out there beyond those screens.
A world full of wonder and connection.
Exactly. Then, for older kids, like 6 to 13, Haidt shifts the focus to encouraging independence.
Okay, so giving them more freedom, more responsibility.
Right. Letting them run errands and walk to school with friends, do sleepovers, all those things that give them a sense of agency, you know.
Yeah, like they can navigate the world on their own.
And as they get even older, like those teenagers, 13 to 18, Haidt's all about fostering those real-world experiences.
Okay, like what? Give me some examples.
Driving, part-time jobs, maybe even like a high school exchange program.
Yeah, getting them out of their comfort zones and into the world.
He has this quote that's really stuck with me. The more we protect our children from unhappiness as children, the more likely they are to be unhappy as adults.
That's deep. So it's almost like those struggles, those uncomfortable moments are actually beneficial in the long run.
Right. It's like we're building their emotional immune system.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so throughout all those stages, Haidt really emphasizes open communication.
Right. Talking to your kids about tech, setting clear boundaries.
It's not about being like a dictator, right?
No way. It's about collaborating, working together to navigate this whole digital landscape.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got some good advice for parents. What about schools? How can they help create a healthier environment?
Well, Haidt is a huge advocate for phone-free schools.
Oh, yeah, we touched on that earlier. No phones allowed in the classroom.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where kids can actually focus.
Be present, engage with each other.
He also talks about the importance of unstructured playtime, especially recess.
Oh, good old-fashioned reset.
Right. Let them run around, use their imaginations. It's so crucial for development.
I'm totally with him on that one. Okay, but let's be real. It's not all on parents and schools.
Right. Tech companies have a huge role to play in all of this.
So what does Haidt say they need to do?
Well, he argues that they need to be more responsible, like they have a moral obligation to protect kids.
Okay, so how do they actually do that?
Well, one of his suggestions is to raise the age of internet adulthood to 16.
Oh, interesting. So like no social media accounts or certain content before that age.
Right, kind of like how we have age restrictions for alcohol and tobacco.
It's acknowledging that social media can be just as potent, just as potentially harmful.
Exactly. He also suggests stronger age verification systems, to make it harder for kids to lie about their age.
Smart. And what about transparency and accountability?
He's big on that too. He wants them to prioritize well-being over profits and engagement.
Okay, that's a big ask, considering how many of these companies make money.
It is, but it's a conversation we need to have, especially if we want to create a healthier digital space for young people.
Totally. And then finally, there's the role of government.
Right. They can't just sit on the sidelines.
What does Haidt think they should be doing?
He suggests policies that support those phone-free schools we were talking about, like actually making it a law. He also talks about raising the minimum age for social media use.
Again, like those regulations we have for alcohol and tobacco.
And he suggests investing in public spaces that encourage, outdoor play, exploration, connection.
Yeah, giving kids those alternatives to screen time.
So it's really a multi-pronged approach, isn't it?
Parents, educators, tech companies, governments, we all have a part to play in this.
And while it might seem overwhelming, Haidt ultimately offers a hopeful message. He believes we can create a better future for young people.
A future where technology enhances their lives rather than hinders them.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming childhood, reconnecting with those essential aspects of human development that have gotten a bit lost in our digital world.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into the anxious generation. Haidt really paints a clear picture of the challenges, but he also gives us hope.
Right. He gives us a path forward.
If you want to learn more about Haidt's work and explore those resources we mentioned, be sure to check out the episode description. We've got links to everything down there.
And remember, even though we're wrapping up this deep dive, the conversation doesn't have to end here.
Exactly. Keep thinking, keep questioning, keep talking about these issues, and most importantly, keep advocating for a brighter future for all young people.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.